Wi-Fi. I've got
We'll find that webcam soon enough.
I've got my laptop perched on boxes so that it's actually at eye level, so it's not looking up at me. And I've got this lighting setup, which is literally just a trash can light hanging on the wall. Actually, it's attached to my monitor because this room is just a mess, and the floor is covered in crap.
You make my lighting look professional.
Yeah, I know. It's awful.
Considering all I have is like 2 magic arms and 2 LED panels.
Yeah, that's what's really sad is I have in my collection, $3,000 worth of lighting kit, and it's all packed away. I haven't even gotten any of it out. And where am I going to put it if I put it in a room like this? So I need to buy some cheap stuff and like sticking around there. But this is a podcast, and we are live.
Did you tweet this podcast?
Was I supposed to? Am I supposed to do things?
I don't. Isn't that your job?
Oh, man.
Isn't it not your job?
So if you guys are watching this right now as this show meanders into actually starting,
DJ is still getting on his schedule. DJ is still...
I'm a mess after my...
Coming to terms.
Oh, yeah. Coming from Singapore back to here, I just haven't gotten my sleep schedule right, and I don't even know where Twitter's at these days. Going live with Devin... Live.
Yeah, we are.
Boy, this is great entertainment watching me type.
Watching DJ... Watch as DJ composes a tweet.
Oh, my gosh, really? Okay, I can't even copy something correctly. Because guess what? I have 2 keyboards in front of me, and I used the wrong Control-C, so that doesn't do anything.
Oh. Yeah, you need a Mac-C that...
Yeah, well,
that always screws me up. That screwed me up for a good while. Then I learned how to just instinctively do the different copy and paste and all that.
Mac-C? You mean Control-C?
Command. When you're on a OS X, No,
I'm not a Linux
The Windows key,
user.
basically, on an Apple is called Command. I call it Mac because I'm old, but...
It's that weird squiggly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what that is, but I didn't know it was called Mac-C.
Well, that's anytime you want to do a shortcut for anything, Premiere or whatever else, you do that instead of Control.
All right, man. You ready to start the show?
Let's start the show.
Okay, we're starting the show now. Oh, Steam wants me to update. No, Steam, go away.
Come with me, play Fallout 4.
In 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. I'm drinking coffee at 4 in the afternoon because I fell asleep for like 2 hours today in the middle of the afternoon. My time is all messed up. I don't know where I'm at anymore, and things are disorganized. As you guys can probably see if you're watching this, I am on my laptop yet again because I have no freaking clue where I put my webcam. But Devin joins me today to discuss all kinds of stuff. Devin, what have you been up to, man?
Well, it's 6 p.m. here, and so I'm drinking wine because it's after 5. and I've been working all day. But, oh, man, I've just been slammed with so much studio stuff. Nothing's been fun. I haven't done any on-location stuff. I think I might have something for Al Jazeera later this week. That's still tentative. But for the most part, it's just been dealing with the holidays and tons of work at the studio. There's a pile of boxes behind me. Most of them are Christmas gifts for other people. I'm not like building a studio or something interesting like that. It's just
collecting
lots
Amazon
of
boxes,
pieces, and everything put together. Yeah. So, but dude, that is it with me. How have things been going with you after your trip? Are you slowly getting acclimated back to normal life?
Yeah, the time difference is close enough to the same that you kind of just move into the new time frame when you're in Singapore, but when you get back, you don't move back quite right. So I'm still messed up there, and then we just moved here to this new place during that same transition. So everything I own is still in boxes. I only have like 5 sets of clothes to wear, so it's been on a repeat for the last a while now. It's these chonies are old, man. But otherwise, nothing exciting to report. December is a pretty slow month for me as far as filming goes, and it's raining here, so I'm not
raining here. That's bizarre too. I think December is a slow month for a lot of video people. not a whole lot of companies are out asking for videos to be made as they try to make their fourth quarterlies. So
Yeah, starting next week, I won't probably even see anybody in the office from there till the new year, because you get there and people have little notes taped to their cubes and so on that are like, I'm out of the office until after Christmas, like, oh, great, okay.
Yeah.
And then you look at your project list and there's nothing on it. It's like,
there's nothing to do. You get to the office and you're like, there's not even anything for me to do here.
I'm going to be doing maybe some safety training or something of that nature,
That sounds fun. That sounds real fun.
Oh, yeah. All right. On that note, I think it's probably time for the news. Time for the news.
Oh, excellent.
Time for the news. First thing I've got on the list here is actually, and I'm using I got two mouses here too. That's confusing as heck for me. Boy, am I organized. The first thing up on the list is actually the GH4 price drop. You can now find it for $900. That is very attractive pricing. I've also seen it used for as low as $800. So the GH4 price drop, do you think that means that we're definitely going to see a GH5 at NAB this year?
No. Well, first off, it's still gray market. This is still a few resellers on eBay, but I take it they're dropping price because whatever they're getting it for is also kind of dropping price. But yeah, I'd say considering it's kind of been slowly ramping up. I mean, we've had this GH5 discussion a few times. I think yes, Panasonic needs to get back out there because of the A7S II. And all that going on with that, and the fact that that's risen to popularity, more or less. I mean, you talked about it on the last podcast how, well, it's kind of the same camera. It does have 4K internal, but there isn't a huge selling point besides 4K internal, which for a lot of production flows doesn't matter. So that all being considered, you've got a much cheaper version while you have this expensive version coming out at the same time. But Sony has right now a lot of the attention, because everyone's been talking about their low-light camera, especially just coming out with the FS7, FS5. So for all of that, Sony right now has a big grab on attention. Panasonic still hasn't come out with any kind of successor to an AF100, like there's been rumors about here and there. And
yeah, but the AF100 was pretty junky, man.
No, it was. I'm not saying it was a perfect camera. I mean, so many people on their message boards were like, "Oh, this is gonna like change the industry," and it's just
it was awful.
It wasn't. It was a good idea. It wasn't revolutionary, but we kind of saw that come back when the C series came from Canon. That was kind of the idea with, hey, let's go with interchangeable photography lenses and still give you things like XLR inputs and all the other stuff that you need. So.
Look at these prices, man. The
AF100
for like $500.
I believe it's pretty low bit rate, though, guys.
That's like a GH2 sensor, I believe, that they've got slapped into that guy. Man, now you're talking about eBay and the price for the GH4, and I wanted to mention, I don't know if you saw this, but Canon's actually suing several of the sellers on eBay that are selling Canon products gray market at extremely discounted prices.
Oh, I haven't seen that at all.
Yeah, there's a big lawsuit. And in fact, let me see if I can find the link. Actually, I don't have any clue where the link is, so I'm not going to go and find it.
I know nothing about legal stuff and legal jargon, but to me that just doesn't sound like something that you can do. I mean, I guess...
Well, they didn't just start to sue the companies that are selling them. They named in the lawsuit the CEO of I think it's F&V or F&S. That's one of the main resellers on eBay of these, like, when you see the 5D Mark III, for example, as like a bargain basement price of maybe like $1,900 or $1,800. It's usually those guys. And what they do is they go to another market and they use currency exchange in order to purchase. Like if you go to Singapore, for example, it's 70 cents to the dollar. So they can buy a bunch of cameras at that pricing and then take the kit apart. You have the discount of the kit plus the discount of the currency exchange and sell them in the United States and make enough of a profit to move cameras.
Justify all that work, yeah.
Yeah, and they do it in volume. So, and they've been getting away with it for the last 5 or 6 years, and no one's really said anything about it because everybody sort of knows what gray market is and how it works. But Canon has gotten kind of upset with them and has started filing lawsuits against these companies for doing that. And they've named 2 of the main eBay sellers, but there's still a lot of smaller ones that are out there kind of still getting away with it. Maybe it's not a big enough company to attack directly, so they're maybe firing shots across the bow. But it is interesting that Canon, as their market share and money starts to fall off, that they are suing these guys now and trying to find other ways to make their money back.
Yeah, that really is interesting because there aren't many markets where doing that is a viable business plan, where currency conversion is actually going to net you any kind of profit. Just because of, banks and a lot of taxation and stuff like that goes on in between all that stuff. But then with gray market, you can, I'm sure, kind of skirt some of that stuff. So it's interesting. I don't think Canon, though, is actually going to accomplish anything other than make it known that this is an unacceptable practice, which, might help them with their branding or whatever. But this feels like one of those situations where you may stop a few companies from doing it, but a few more will pop up and keep doing it because there's a way to make money off of it. So I get why Canon doesn't want their product devalued, but that almost makes it sound like Canon, hates the used market as well, which I'm sure they do, because to be honest, the used market is a sign of profit loss. If someone else buys a used 5D Mark III, that is money that doesn't go to Canon. That's money that goes to somebody else. So instead of focusing necessarily on how many cameras are in circulation, and those are the numbers you should focus on, some companies will focus on, when so many people resell our products because either they don't like it, they don't meet expectations or whatever, we don't get any of that money from those customers, the secondary customers. I think that's silly thinking, and I think that they already did get money from these sellers. They're just trying to stop devaluing them because it's hurting their sales in America, and so the profit margins they're supposed to make in America and other places, they aren't hitting right because people are going to this gray market stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it, but I imagine like a lot of this stuff, it's going to be litigated for years, and we won't even know what happens after it does because it'll all be, NDA.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see the announcements as they sort of go after these people. But I want to switch gears on this and talk about gray market for just a second. Devin, have you ever bought any gray market cameras?
Yes, absolutely. I'm pretty sure my my GH3 was probably gray market, if I recall right. No. No. I think my GH3 was Adorama, if I remember right. It was a while back. A lot of lenses. There's been a few. No, even all the lenses have either been used or they've been the cheaper like Sigmas or something like that, and I just buy those pretty much at MSRP price.
So I've got 2 right here that are gray market. I've got the 5D Mark III. I don't know if you guys can. Here you go. 5D Mark III and the 6D. These are way too big for my little tiny web camera here, but both of these were bought gray market, and both of them were in that sort of like crazy wacky deal phase. I don't know if you remember the price structure for the 5D Mark III, but before they discovered the RAW hack, the camera was dipping down under the $2,000 range. I believe I picked it up in one of those fire sales for like $1,800. Then it flew all the way back up to $3,000 and some change when the RAW hack came out, and now it's finally settled back down into that $1,800-ish range again, now with the suspected 5D Mark IV coming out. And honestly, other than the shipping issues that you get with gray market cameras off of eBay, it's a pretty good deal. I mean, the 6D, I want to say I saved like $500 buying the 6D body, and that was fairly close to when it was released, within like 6 months, maybe 8 months of the release of the 6D. So, and when I talk about the shipping issues, probably should mention a lot of these sellers, since they're shipping from either overseas or some kind of intermediary warehouse, they require a signature when it shows up, and so you have to be home in order to receive your product.
Right.
So that's where it can be issue for some people, and you see a lot of complaints, is because if you're not there, they'll try 3 times and then send it back. You can call the carrier if it's UPS or FedEx and have them hold it at one of their main stations, and you can go sign for it there.
If it's like DHL, then you really don't have a chance.
Yeah, where are you going to go?
As far as I know, DHL doesn't let you do that stuff.
Yeah, and so you got to be careful with that. Make sure that you have like a relative, a family member, or somebody home to sign for it if you're ordering them. But otherwise, Man, the cameras, they work great. I've had my 5D Mark III since the release. I've had my 6D for quite some time. Love both of the cameras and had no problems with either one of them, other than the battery grip issue I think I mentioned about that weird blue line I was getting, but that's neither here nor there. So gray market camera is not that bad of a deal. I hope that Canon fails to crack down on this simply because I like enjoying the discount. Now, moving on down the line here, we've also got some EVF news, and this is kind of interesting actually to see that the announcement came after the camera was released. You might be familiar with the Leica SL we've talked about on the podcast before. That had a very impressive EVF built into the camera, and after its release, Epson announced the EVF's the actual imaging chip that's being used in there, and it looks really nice. It's a little bit bigger than what you get in a GH4 body. Those are around 0.5 inches. This is 0.66 inches. And the resolution is 1400 by 1050, which puts it into, what is that, GXVA or something like that? Devin, you
Oh
remember?
my gosh, I don't even know what those resolutions are.
Yeah, all those wacky
VGA.
like VGA, QVGA, XVGA, all those. But the point I'm getting at here is that's a phenomenal amount of pixels jammed into a really tiny space, less than an inch. At what point do you think we go from having these be sort of adequate? I mean, you've used the GH3, GH4, the viewfinder. It's better, but it's not amazing. At this point, this is like 35 or 40% more pixels than what's on the GH4. When we get to that point and go above that, you think it will no longer even need a DSLR, like a mirror, in order to get the same quality?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And
no?
While I see it improving, yes, there's a fundamental flaw when it comes to photography. I mean, on video, we've always had EVFs. That's the only way to do video, because video is just electronically transmitted and stuff like that. So EVF has always been necessary for video. So it always feels like something that's comfortable that you're like, I could always do this. One thing I've noticed, though, with every EVF system for photography purposes is that it won't do low light. Like it will sit here and bring down the refresh rate in order to match kind of the shutter speed that it's previewing at to see what you're
that's a good
trying
point.
to take a picture of. So anytime you're in a low light environment, it becomes laggy and slow, and that's not any fault of the EVF. That's just the physics of your sensor is allowing more light in so you can preview your composition before you take your photo. So it's always frustrating to use in low light environments. So I still see a lot of photographers. I mean, right now the mirrorless market's blowing up. You can't deny that. And the mirrorless market, probably over the past 2 years, maybe it was only the last year, has started taking away market share from the DSLR market. And I see that as a growing trend. That's something that'll happen. But I think on the pro level, your guys who are doing the 5Ds and the 7Ds, whether they're at the football stadium or they're in Iraq, in the war, whatever that's going on, when the action's happening, I see a lot of photographers who are going to want that kind of like accurate responsiveness that like it just works. You look through it and you see what you're going to take a picture of, and you can have a lot of confidence in what you're taking a picture of. EVFs do bring a little bit of confidence in the fact that like you can preview an image after you've taken it without taking your eye off, which is kind of cool. That may be niche for some people, but that's kind of cool. As well as if the EVF is matching what the photo will look like, you already know your exposure, color, white balance, and everything else before you take the photo. So it's interesting because you can get a lot of feedback from an EVF to know what the final product will look like before you pull the trigger. But then at the same time, if you're rapid firing and running around and trying to get triggers and you're used to already working off of your built-in light meter and stuff like that, an EVF is just going to slow you down. So I never see it completely going away, but this I feel like is reaching the level when you talk about over 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. It does get blown up. Like that sounds like really nice, but understanding the optics and how like any small space between the pixels and stuff like that all gets blown up once you put it through optics so that it properly matches with your eye so your eye can focus on it. To see that, I go, this is impressive, and I love seeing this kind of stuff because for video cameras, this is absolutely necessary. That's the reason why I spent a bunch of money on EVF, because having high detailed images in your EVF is absolutely crucial for video.
Unless you're lazy like me and use just a screen with a box around it, because I don't like putting my eye up against stuff.
Sure. But in the video market, since mirrorless has blown up, I see EVFs becoming more popular. And more important in the mirrorless market, and probably a lot of people who are on the fence who are like, well, yeah, a mirror is nice, but if it means I can like minimize my camera profile, which makes it lighter, and I can use smaller lenses with it, or I give an ability for adapters. We've talked about this, the advantages of mirrorless over mirrored. This kind of technology can push them over the edge. Where being like, well, now I'm actually having an enjoyable experience taking pictures. Like I said, low light, I don't think there's any way around low light being a pain, unless you take away some of the advantages of EVF, where instead of previewing what your exposure will be, you'll just kind of like maintain a higher shutter speed while having a slightly darker image, which makes it a little harder to compose, but at least like it's more reactive if you're turning around shooting a lot.
They could do some tricks too. On a regular DSLR, you have your preview button that you have to push in order to see like what your f-stop setting is and what it actually looks like, and otherwise the lens goes wide open. So there are ways that they could kind of get more light into the camera to work with that. Honestly, for me, my GH4, it got exposed to salt water.
What?
Yeah, a couple, like 7 or 8 months ago, or a year ago now. It's been quite some time. And because I was shooting on the ocean, and long story short, waves, those are a thing. They happen. They splash you. And the camera came out okay, but ever since then, my EVF has been permanently fogged. Like, I can't see anything through it.
You haven't repaired it? It's like two screws. Two screws, man.
Is it? I didn't even look. I'm like, well, I don't really use it that much. I'm don't use it at all.
If I recall right, it's been a while, but I feel like I've already taken my EVF off of my GH3, and since they're the same body, I imagine they're similar, where it's just like a couple screws, and I think it's for the purpose of replacing the glass in case the glass gets cracked or something like that. So it's supposed to be an easy-to-replace part, maybe? I don't know. It's been a while. That could have been another camera. It's been a long time, but I think that's something you could probably fix.
I've just been working around it. Like, I've just been like, I'll use the flip out screen.
You're like,
I
use screens. I sunshades. I'm Mr. Sunshade over here. I don't believe in having anything against my eyes. I can't be bothered. I just sunshade all day.
And I don't like having
DJ # sunshade all day.
Yeah, the other issue, okay. The point is, I've lived with it for quite some time, and it really hasn't affected my use. Even in photography, I don't use the GH4 for anything that will be remotely low light. 1600 ISO is it for the GH4. So if I'm planning to go out and shoot something that's going to be indoors with poor lighting, or it's going to be at night or anything else, I'm going to either grab my 5D Mark III or the A7S. I'm not going to grab the GH4. And for everything else, man, the flip out screen's just fine. I can handle it.
Yeah.
And even if I forget to bring a little box to go around the GH4 screen, I can do this. It's not that hard to put my hands around the screen and shade it and look in there. So it works. The screen is really nice on the GH4.
And the screen's bright too. I've been really impressed I was one of those who went from a T2i to a GH3. And I believe the GH3 and GH4 screen are identical. It was only the EVF that got upgraded, but don't quote me on that. But the screen brightness on the GH3 really can do just fine even in some outdoor environments. I mean, it's not the brightest monitor. My EVF is brighter than it, and so are some of my 7-inch screens. But I'm pleasantly surprised. On overcast days, I really don't need a sunshade on that screen if I'm shooting straight off of the screen, which most of the time I am, because in video, the video DSLR scape, you're not really ever shooting up against your eye just for things you attach to it and everything else. It always becomes something slightly off of you that you hold. It's never something like photography where you hold it up to your eye. So but I've been impressed by the screen, and I think a lot of the screens are the same way. I can't speak to the A7S, how good that screen is, because I haven't used that outdoors, but
I wish that the A7S had the flip-out screen instead of Sony's stupid accordion thing. Because, I mean, it is nice if you. I know we've talked about this before, and you kind of scold me for this, but I like to shoot with my camera at my chest. So having the flip out screen on the A7S to look down at is fine, and that doesn't bother me at all. But a lot of times I want to flip it up and turn it towards a direction, or have it off to the side, and you can't get that, and so it's really frustrating. But the screen looks nice.
Oh, and it's so funny because I, shooting with a T2i way before the flip out screens. Were really popular in these DSLR for video cameras. It was one of those where, like, when I was looking at the GH3 and a few other options, I was like, well, do I need a flip-out screen? Like, how important is that really? And then once you have one, because it had been a while since I, like, used a DVX 100B or something like that at that point. But then once you start using it again, you're like, oh, my gosh, just every single shot. Like, you set it up on a tripod, and you can, like, stand to the side of a tripod. If you need to scoot the tripod to the back of a room, you could butt it up there and face the screen. You could shoot yourself, and it's super easy. Like, just all these things where you're like, oh, cool, I don't have to carry around a second monitor to, like,
this
make
right
sure I'm
here,
getting the job done.
This is pretty much standard in every one of my Canon bags. I have a small HD DP6 or DP4 to carry with me because I need a monitor to change directions. But with the GH4, no monitor in the bag whatsoever. In fact, like, I don't even bother. There's no real reason because the flip-out screen is good enough for most things. It takes the place of a monitor, and I want flip-out screens on everything. I want them on all my cameras. I don't care, Canon, if you think it's unprofessional to have a flip-out screen. I want a variant of the 5D Mark III with a flip-out screen.
With that being said, I don't think Canon doesn't include flip-out monitors because they don't think it's professional, and they think, like, oh, you should be using our viewfinder. That's the whole reason for an optical.
That's actually one of their press releases.
System.
It says we don't want to, unprofessional, and not unprofessional in the sense that it would make you look amateurish. Unprofessional as in they aren't able to seal the body to the professional level that they think they should for that level of camera, and it's more about water sealing and
absolutely.
durability.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, because thanks to Digital Rev, I've seen like 7Ds and stuff like that thrown downstairs, and 5Ds, and it's amazing what some of these cameras can stand up to. And when you pay that much for a DSLR from Canon, you are getting a quality product that's meant to handle the harshest conditions there is.
This guy's been dropped from 10 feet, and I've got a ding right there, and that's it. That's the kind of durability you get out of the 5D Mark III, and then to a lesser extent the 6D.
So I get not having a flip out on something like the 5Ds. But it still seems like something for me at this point. The market's changing, and even though you may not like it, it may be something you start looking at accommodating, because it wouldn't be impossible to have a flip-out screen that is that has the weatherproofing that they desire, but at the same time, then it's just easily replaceable. Like,
well, if they locked it in somehow or had like a locking mechanism for the screen, that would probably do away with some of the durability issues that they were concerned with. Maybe like some sort of engaging teeth or something like that to keep it.
And if you wrap the screen while it's closed, if you wrap the screen inside of the body as opposed to like the GH4 where it's kind of just a part of the body that hangs out from it, that can help to toughen it up too. I mean, I'm not a camera designer, I'm not an engineer, I don't know any of this kind of stuff, but I think that having it kind of easily replaceable with the assumption that some people are going to drop this and it's going to break the screen, but the rest of the camera will be fine, and just making sure that that part is somewhat easily serviceable by Canon, say. Maybe they don't want to deal with the warranty costs because maybe that would be covered under their warranty, because they're usually really good about their warranty. How long does their warranty usually go? Like
it's only 1 year.
1 year warranty
for a body.
Really?
Yeah, but if
I don't
you
know
pay
why
for
I thought it was more.
You can pay for the Canon professional service, which I paid for a number of years. I don't pay for it right now, but you can send your lenses in. They'll clean your body, and I think they give you 60% off on repairs. So if you really mess up, so it's kind of a warranty, not really, because you're paying like $95 a year for the service.
It's like those cell phone like plans.
But I use it to have my body cleaned, so because they give you 2 free cleanings, and then if you go to an event where the Canon professional booth is there, anything that you bring with you from Canon, they'll clean for you. So you can have your lenses all taken apart and clean. You know, if you have gunk, I've sent in lenses before when I had like fake blood stuck to all the sides and stuff. It's really gross. And I mean, it's a pain for me to clean it off because I mean, alcohol wipes and like Q-tips and stuff. You send it into them, they have all the right tools to do that. They have like ultrasonic cleaners for the front elements and stuff like that. So it's pretty nice. I mean, it's worth paying for if you use it. A lot of times they're counting on you not bothering with shipping your stuff in or whatever. So it's not for everybody.
They make their money.
Now, moving on down the line, because we've kind of wandered all over the place here, I wanted to talk a little about this Indiegogo here. This is the Luna camera, and it seems as though 360-degree cameras are all the rage. This guy had a goal of $50,000. They've reached the goal, and now they're up to $87,000. It has two 190-degree fisheye lenses, one on either side, a magnetic base to attach, and is small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. Do you think this is going to be any better than something like the Kodak SP360? And with the two lenses, do you think they'll have any software implementation that's good enough to use to sort of turn this into a proper 360-degree image when they're done?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been watching, what's the company with the stick thing? Theta, something like that?
There's 6 flavors of that now. What is Nokia? Doesn't Nokia even have their own flavor of 360
probably has
camera?
One too. But I think the really popular one that's been taken off is from a brand called Theta. I think they're kind of new. They might have done a Kickstarter to get going or something like that. But Theta 360 looks like the one I'm talking about. Yeah, this little stick camera. I've seen everyone on YouTube using this one. This one seems to be really popular. I feel like we've had the talk about 360 before, about how it can help kind of that VR environment, living experiences, simulating experiences, more or less. But in terms of storytelling and being cinematic, there's too many limitations on this kind of technology, just because if you're using the technology in a 360 fashion, then it makes it really hard because it requires interaction. And interaction in a way that is like more than just sitting on the couch. Like a video game you can play sitting on the couch. If you wear Google goggles and you watch a 360 video, you have to spin around and move. You got to use like an office chair, stand up and do it. It's like slightly more interaction. I know that sounds like such a small thing, but
well, I think reading and watching all their sort of advertising material for this particular camera, they're kind of angling it towards mostly action events. You know, they have a guy hang gliding, they have some people on the beach and so on. I don't think this company in particular sees themselves as a filmmaking event per se. It's more like, hey, experience what I just did because I'm so awesome. Look at how awesome my event was.
Yeah.
You know?
But even then, I still feel like that is less. Like, I've watched so many GoPro 360 videos. I've been all about them. But even I understand that is the crappiest version of the video.
Yes.
Like the one good example, GoPro came out with a video of some, I think it was Indy cars. It might have been Formula One. Because I don't know if they were doing it with Red Bull or not. Anyways, they were doing some kind of high-end cars like that over the Golden Gate Bridge. And they had 360 video where while they're going over the Golden Gate Bridge, you'd jump between different cars and you could spin around. And if you're on your computer, you could pan it, or the goggles, you could spin your chair. And it's one of those where I go, this is cool, but think about how much more exciting and exhilarating this video would be if they had like 50 different camera shots of it flying by cameras and like, you know, high-end drone shots and stuff like that, and all these different angles and with editing and stuff like that to help build kind of the story. You know, that's not really a story, but like you get what I'm saying.
It gives you a little bit of momentum
pacing.
Because otherwise, you know, with an actual edited video, you are forced to go through the perspective of the editor through a scene. And if you watch the scene just with one camera straight on, it's way different than if you have cuts back and forth. You have dramatic shots of, you know, hands and motion and things like that. And with cars driving, the same thing. You know, you have wheels squealing, dirt being kicked up from the wheels, and the cars flying by. But if you're in a 360, you're just spinning around. Yep, there's car number one, car number two.
And that's part of this, because inherently by having that interaction, you need to leave the editing loose because you need to give time for the person to interact with the environment. That's something that people learn in video game design is like, how do you add pacing to something where, you know, somebody else is in control of when things happen? And that's kind of like you just have to be loose and let them do it on their own. You can't enforce a pacing on them. And so with 360 videos, I really feel like they'll be around, but sooner or later they're just going to kind of go away and people aren't going to be that interested in it. I know that seems like...
So is this the next 3D?
I feel like, yeah, it's the next 3D because, dude, there was such a boom with 3D. I mean, we had cell phones that could take 3D and show you 3D photos and video without needing glasses, which was always the complaint. Oh, 3D is going to take off once you don't need glasses. And now, like, what are people talking about at CES? Like curved TVs and 8K and contrast ratios, which is the same thing, maybe not the curved part, but the same things they were talking about when they came out with HD TVs was contrast ratios and detail. So, like, it's one of those things where, like, 3D came around for a while and it went away, and I kind of see 360 being something like it'll come, and we'll still do it because we have technology that can do it. But it's one of those that I don't see it sticking around, and I just don't see it being the best way to view a video, even if it is of an experience or a sporting event or something like that. There's some situations where this is super necessary. This kind of technology, say like you're taking some kind of robotic submarine to the bottom of the depths to like look around and look at stuff like that. There's places where this technology can definitely be used and very useful. And maybe, yeah, I don't know, we reach a point where like 8K video in a 360 is the best way to shoot, and then you just crop whatever you want. But even then, shooting 4K video and cropping in post, I don't think leads to very good results either. So,
well, and something like this, you know, your resolution's pretty low. If you look at like the video footage, the example footage from that Kodak 360 camera, the SP360, that one, man, everything looks awful. But you have to stretch things out and do some conversion in order to get the image out of it.
And it's not just the sensor. It's not even like you could say, "Oh, throw an 8K sensor in there; it'll make it look better."
No, it won't, because the optics are stretching.
Wide.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're doing a bunch of trickery to like squeeze the world back into a regular perspective. And by the time you do that, your image quality is down into like the standard def range. And looking at this, I mean, at least it has two cameras instead of doing that weird global single camera in the center. But
sure,
it's, I don't know.
So
it's a thing.
The only, and in terms of filmmaking, the only times where something close to an element of like 360 video has been done that I can think about that were like really helped to create a better product in the end result was in the Social Network. For some reason, there was a long shot, a faraway shot of the main actor walking down a street, and for some reason, rather than doing a pan and move, I don't know if it's because they were limited by resources or what, they used 3 cameras and stitched, I think, like 3 red cameras at 6K or something like that together, and then did a digital pan with him down the street, and it was along in a focal length that it didn't look like a digital pan, if you get what I'm saying. Like it can look if you're shooting wide and you're trying to crop later in post. And then another way was in that the one with Tom Cruise and the end of the world with the one girl and the bubble ships and everything else. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No idea. The bubble ship?
The one with their Empire State Buildings buried in sand. Like the whole world is just sand or whatever. It's all like dead.
You talking about Planet of the Apes?
No, it was Tom Cruise, man. Anyways, I'm not going to look it up. But so what they did was in their little control center, which was like up above the clouds, they shot a 360 video from atop a mountain and then took that video and projected that 360.
Oh, you're talking about Cloud Atlas?
No. Onto a bunch of screens outside of their control room. So it was one of those where it wasn't necessarily something that made it straight to print. It was like they did a special effect and then they projected that special effect, which did all the lighting and everything inside of there. And that was one of those times where I went, oh, they kind of made their own 360 video, rebroadcasted the 360 video in order to like have all the proper lighting and environment changes and everything else. And so I also see it being very important for visual effects people to like get the lighting that they need and what's what do they
you're
call
talking
it?
Like a 360 degree with real cameras, not
yes, with real
none
cameras.
of this like silliness that they've got here. These are consumer grade, like $300 range. You know,
right,
little ball in your hand things. You're not going to do any of that with something like that.
But what if I'm talking about like for visual effects? One of the biggest things to make visual effects work is environmental reflections and lighting. Yeah. And if for a really cheap product, instead of, you know, taking pictures of the chrome globe and like the white globe or whatever, the gray globe, and like figuring all that stuff out, you could just shoot with a 360 video in that environment and then just copy paste it. And then two, it's even a video. So if you're doing camera moves and stuff like that, and your whatever 3D object is temporarily being filmed at that location with one of these 360 videos, then when you get to post, while that object moves around the room, it's like, yeah, it's like some of the tracking is in there and everything else. So for me, I'm like, that is...
That gets a little tricky too, though, because imagine like ray tracing light around, an actor in the middle of this, virtual 360 scene. So you pan around the actor, but now you're having to do like light ray tracing for the face and however else. And that,
but I'm saying that I see this being used as a tool, but not as a camera, if that makes more sense. I see it being used in a few situations to do cool stuff, but not being a camera. And the movie I was talking about was Oblivion. So
never seen it.
I can tell.
I don't watch a lot of movies, man. I'm sorry.
There is a cool behind the scenes to Oblivion for those that care about how they created that helipad or whatever, that control tower that they were in, and how they did all the lighting for it all practically to save them a ton of time in post instead of green screening and dealing with reflections and everything else. So that's interesting to check out if you're into that stuff.
All right, moving on down the line, we should, we're really running these long today. This is the FS5. We've talked about this a little bit. This is the first practical hands-on experience that we've kind of seen posted, and this comes from newsshooter.com, formerly, DSLRnewsshooter.com.
Probably.
Yeah, Dan Chung took this out and played around with this guy. What do you think, Devin? It looks like a great camera to me. I've been excited about the FS5 from Sony for quite some time, especially in the price range. I think it's retails like what, 5,000?
Yeah, actually it does. And the bigger brother, I think retails for about 7.5. Maybe
the FS7 and the FS700, by the way, folks, is dropped significantly in price. The form factor is still that weird boxy business, but
no, it's not. It's the one that goes on your shoulder. The FS7.
The FS700.
Oh, 700,
which was the top end,
right?
And it's dropped in price. And if you look at Sony's layout for cameras, the FS700 sits more around the high range. It has a few more features than the FS5 and the FS7, but it's the form factor. But the prices come way down because the FS7 and the FS5 are eating its lunch. The FS5, man, it is tiny. It is beautiful looking. It doesn't have the AF that we've seen in Canon's C100 Mark II and C300 Mark II, but everything else looks really nice. It even comes with what I'd say a fairly proper EVF on this guy.
Yeah, actually, the EVF was supposed to be one of the impressive parts of it too, along with the low light. I think it's definitely a contender. The thing is that it's such a cheaper price. I know for a fact that some of the news studios in America are actually looking at possibly using these to replace some of their cameras. Like we've talked about before, Blackmagic has been trying to convince broadcasters to use Ursa Minis and Ursas in place of their broadcast ENGs, the market that's been dominated by Sony and Panasonic for decades now. But they've actually been thinking about specifically the FS7, not the FS5, but the same breed of camera, for using B4 mount adapters and adapting their current ENG lenses to this form factor, not necessarily for the sake of 4K, but just having that flexibility of a wide exposure range as well as low light capability. Even when cropping in for, the B4, it's still going to have really impressive low light compared to what these ENG 2/3 inch sensor cameras can, normally do in low light, which is usually pretty mediocre by today's standards. So it's something to consider that even the pros are looking at this because they're like, we're getting broadcast quality out of this, plus we can put photography lenses on it and do really fancy stuff too, because a lot of new shooters out there would love to do more cinematic stuff. Not necessarily like they're trying to copy, the H Vice. Not like they're trying to copy Vice's style, but there's a few new shooters when they're doing features and stuff like that who would like to have a bit more flexibility and kind of shallow up the depth of field a little bit more and have a little bit more control over what's going on with the look and the camera of it.
Now, you shoot more news than I do. I've never really worked in the news environment. Is autofocus primary manual or mode of focus, or do people actually
No,
go out and manual focus on a regular basis?
it's
in
pretty
news
much
and
manual.
broadcast?
If you look at your usual like,
Because I've seen a ton of people with like FX100s, the old Canon like 2/3 inch sensor cameras, and when I see them out in the wild with those, it looks like they're just relying on autofocus and using their zoom rocker.
Yeah, it's for when you have what's like called video journalists or VJs. They'll usually just kind of have everything set to auto a lot of the time, and they'll just be handed something like HPX 170s or HMC 150s from Panasonic, as well as like a few of the Canon ones and stuff like that. But no, the guys who actually are camera operators and they aren't doing a second job as a journalist or something like that, their hands constantly on the focus. It's something they don't need to worry about. Because they're constantly doing it. If you look at the design of an ENG lens, which tends to be very long, it has a very cone shape, and it widens out to the ends, and they tend to be very wide lenses. You'll see that it's built around the idea that, one, you hold on to the lens to maintain the balance of the camera on your shoulder, as well as make sure it doesn't rock away from you. And that's all of your controls, just like if the handle on a C300 has all your controls minus the zoom, because you're on the lens, so you can have zoom right there. And the left hand is just constantly on that focus wheel. So they're constantly touching it. Even if they aren't moving it, they're touching it because it's a support point for the camera, so they can keep the camera still, as well as if something suddenly changes, they can catch it in, the guys who've been doing this for years, they can catch it in a millisecond when somebody moves a little closer to the camera or something like that changes. So they don't rely at all on an autofocus system. They don't trust it at all. Their hand is on the focus because anything can happen, and they're going to nail the focus as soon as that something happens. So part of that, it helps that they have a smaller sensor, so they do have a longer depth of field. So they have a little bit more leaning room, even when they go wide open at something like a 1.8 or 1.4, because 2/3 inch sensor is really tiny. It's kind of round, super 16-ish. So they still,
You're not going to have razor thin depth of field, obviously, with a 2/3 inch sensor.
But that's one of the reasons why they'd be interested in something like an FS7 is that they get those abilities. For one thing, they can mount their lenses that they've spent tens of thousands of dollars on, still get good use out of them, and which are great lenses for running around and getting the shot and getting into focus. And then if it's a slower pace and they want to go for something a little prettier, they can throw on photography lenses on here because it's that Sony mount, and you can adapt anything to it, some Canon L glass, whatever you want. So having that kind of flexibility, I think, is what they're really interested in, and it's come down at such a point that it's really under what sometimes their budget is for buying a new ENG camera, so from Panasonic or Sony. So all that being considered, it kind of becomes like, yeah, this kind of makes sense as the next generation of cameras. It's lighter, it's cheaper, and it's starting to come out with all the broadcast quality we expect from our cameras.
Yeah, I'm looking right now on B&H just to see, and it looks like the FS5 without a lens is $5,599. So that is pretty attractive, especially when you consider like my A7S or my 5D Mark III. I paid around $3,000 for those cameras or more, plus you add a lens or two.
Right.
Something like this, it's pretty nice, and I paid this much for my C100, which thank God I sold that before the market fell out of it. I always complained about that, and everybody's like, oh, no, this is going to be the camera I use for the next 7 years. And look at the fire sale on the C100. So in your face, people who told me that I was crazy for not liking the C100. Now,
yeah, absolutely. And remember, too, unlike any of the Canon cameras at all, while the Sonys are also cheaper, you're also getting like 240 frames at 1080. Like, talk about some serious high-speed stuff that only Sony is really nailing. Because I can't think of any other cameras out there that aren't Sony. Even Sony point and shoots are hitting 240 at 1080p.
Yeah, but the point and shoots, their high speed is pretty rough. I mean, it's like limited to like what, 8 seconds?
I think it's 2.
Oh, 2? That's even worse.
But I understand that. I'm just saying that Sony seems to be really interested in high speed, and no other camera manufacturer seems to be.
I think they're just really like, they have it on their main video processing chip that they're using, and they just, well, we'll just throw it in with everything. Don't even worry about it, The other thing that's attractive about the SF5 is that you can actually, or FS5, is that you could use it with a Metabone speed booster with Canon lenses. So now, you know, you can use your stills lenses with this, but you can get that extra bit of light and get more of a full frame look out of it if you want to. That's very attractive. Or you could combine this with something like the Sigma, what is it, 18 to 35 millimeter f1.8. Yep. And a speed booster, and
a speed booster, yeah, it'd be the brightest thing in the world. And you'd have no problems in any low light environment with this camera. You'd be out shooting campfires and stuff like that without a problem. The real question, which one reason I brought up this story too, is because he was using that LED light that you said you grabbed one of, that you were a fan of, the small.
Are you talking about the Aperture
Aladdin?
Lightstorm?
No, the Aladdin.
The Aladdin.
Yeah, the little one, the one that like had a built-in rechargeable battery. And on the last podcast, I'm like, but it's rechargeable. How are you supposed to like turn around and shoot right away? Look at the second picture. He doesn't understand what I'm talking about. Look at the second picture. But there's a small Aladdin light that he was interested in. This was in the story too. But the real question comes to you, DJ, that you know, you felt like the C100 wasn't really for you. It didn't work. Would one of these Sony cameras start to appear to you? I know you like the super small factor. You like carrying stuff around. But is there some kind of project where you imagine having physical like XLR connectors and like physical audio gain dials and stuff like that in what is still kind of a small package? Is this starting to interest you, or do you feel like this is another C100 that you're gonna like hate and not really be interested in?
No, when I saw this, I actually started crunching the numbers to determine if I could squeeze it into my budget. I'm still amortizing a few of my cameras because I have to, you know, make sure that I make enough money off of them in order to justify the purchase. So until I get to that point, this one is not in the cards simply financially because I've made some other choices rather rashly earlier on that, you know, have limited that. But once I've gotten through that, I will be looking again at full-size cameras, and the FS5...
You're not going to sell your A7S to buy one of these, is what you're telling me.
My A7S, the resale value has fallen through the toilet.
Yeah,
you can go buy a A7S Mark I now for, you know, $1,600, $1,500, and I paid $3,000 and some change for it. So, I mean... I have to use that camera for the length of time that I spent money on it. Otherwise, it's not worth it to me. So I generally try to make at least 3 to 4 times the value out of the camera body before I'm willing to sell it. The A7S has still got at least another year of legwork on it being charged out before I get rid of it. The FS5 though does look really nice. I will say in that video that you link to here in the show notes, he was shooting mostly 3200 ISO.
Yeah, that's what he posted.
It's not nearly as dramatic as shooting at 100,000 plus ISO on the FS7 or not FS7D. Man, there's so many closely related titles to these camera names. The Sony S7, so I don't know. I can't say that I would go for low light for this. This would be more like if I were to replace my GH4 body and maybe a 5D Mark III, that might be closer to the range because I still do need really low light performance.
It's still doing better than a GH3 at 3200. That's the part to think about.
And better than a GH4. I mean, I won't shoot past 1600 on the GH4, so this is better than that.
And I'm sure the camera can do more, but this is the kind of situation too where he has to do things to a broadcast standard. He has to be mindful of how much grain is in his image. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that will upload to YouTube that maybe I see a lot of people is a little bit more grainy than I would like. But it's passable because by the time YouTube compresses, it loses a lot of that temporal detail. So, like, the noise kind of goes away on its own when you upload to YouTube.
That was my big complaint about the C100. Everybody jumped up and down about how great low-light performance it had, and same with the C300. But really, when you get the footage, your contrast goes away, your color and everything kind of just fades out into this, like, mediocre gray. And then the noise the noise was awful. Like, there was crawling noise all over the place. Like, sure, anything that was exposed somewhat properly would be fine, but any of the background stuff, you had crawling noise all over the place. It looked awful. And I know that the 5D Mark III, for example, smears the crap out of your image, but
that's why you don't see the noise.
The noise doesn't look bad, so I don't really care. And I know people fight about resolution and so on, but for me, that crawling noise is just awful. I can't handle it, don't like it. The S7, I love that camera. I use it all the time. It's great for low light, extreme low light, and it beats the C100 hands down in low light performance. So, I can't really justify. I want this camera. I want it. Okay, you got me. I want the camera. I'm not going to buy it, but I want it. It's on my list.
Yep.
Maybe next year I can justify it towards the middle of the year. But moving on down the line, because we've spent a lot of time on this.
Yes, we have.
Do you want to talk about the teleprompter at all, or do you want to skip that one?
Yeah. Well, I can spend a second on it. Hey, guys, teleprompter.com. That's a pretty easy to remember URL, right? Free teleprompter software. It doesn't scroll. It instead, flashes sentences at you. And it seems to be pretty well at auto-pacing itself so that it's at the way that most people talk when they do broadcast stuff, that you can still control it. And it's completely free. And it works on your phone. So, hey, if you need a prompter and you weren't prepared because the client didn't tell you that they needed a teleprompter, you can try going to teleprompter.com and see if you can have a quick fix.
All right, moving on down the line. I'm going to skip this Veravon story and move to the last thing on the list here. Red has released a new form of the Scarlet. It's the Scarlet-W. This is a 5K camera that's capable of shooting, 120 frames at 4K, 60 frames at 5K, and various other things. The big news here, actually, is that they're finally replacing the last version of the Red sensor, which is long in the tooth, 3 years now. And they've been promising upgrades for quite some time. This one won't be an upgrade cycle, but they will give you a $2,500 credit if you turn in your older camera. It's a $10,000 body. Is this as exciting as it would have been to indie filmmakers 5 or 6 years ago when Red was all the rage? Now that we have things like the camera we just talked about, the Sony FS5, FS7, all of these under this price range offering a ton of features, maybe not quite as in-depth features, 150 frames per second at 4K, 300 frames per second at 2K. Those are really nice, but would you save $5,000 and go with something like the FS7 over this?
That's interesting because you brought up indie filmmakers. I don't think that this has ever been really an interesting approach for indie filmmakers. I guess.
Well, when I say indie filmmakers, I'm talking.
I know.
You're sponsored.
You're
going to
about
Sundance.
$5 million budgets, maybe.
Exactly.
Low budget stuff. No.
Not like my indie budget where I have $20,000 to shoot an entire film.
Your no budget films. No, this is something that I feel like, even for a $5 million production, the Reds have gotten immensely better in terms of their interface, their software, tons of stuff. But the only real advantage with shooting Red has always been that Red medium, being able to shoot raw and correct later. And I feel like a lot of the time, I don't know, for something between 1 to 5 million in their features, I feel like most directors aren't going to want to spend a quarter of their budget on post-production. And then if you're not shooting raw, there becomes less of a reason to go with something like a Red, and you can go with something that's just shooting super high bit rate, ProRes or H.264, and you can look at the Blackmagic cameras at that level and stuff like that. So it's one of those that even when Red was popular, I felt like it was only popular for your super mega blockbusters. They all bragged about it because they didn't have to have a separate high speed camera for a lot of this stuff, like they did on I think Wanted was the first feature film on a Red or something like that. The one where they curved the bullets, if I remember that right. A long time ago. Wow.
That's
friggin' old.
Now if you look at actually what people are shooting on right now, especially in a high production value shoots,
it's Arri Lexus,
it's Arri
across the board.
Yeah, across the board. So, and there's a really great site. It's called shootonwhat.com.
I love that site.
And if you want to know, what the most popular cameras are being used for across the board, you can look up the camera, look up the production, and so on. And primarily, it used to be like red was sort of taking up a good 20 or 30% of the market for productions. Now it's dropping way down. I'm seeing Arri on, everything that goes to an award ceremony is shot on an Arri camera these days, with the occasional Canon popping in or Sony. But I don't know. It's a weird market.
I kind of, let me try to like phrase where I think you're trying to go with this, and that's that the Reds have seemingly lost a lot of popularity, and with so many other people in the marketplace, they're hitting the same things that Red was kind of all about when it started. Because when Red was really kind of becoming, more than half of the films that were in theaters were shot on Red. Red was like the only way to do 4K on the cheap. Maybe that like wasn't a Blackmagic camera or something like that. Like Red was like the only way to get like raw 4K footage, and film on it without spending the price of an Arri Alexa. It was like the only competition out there, I felt, other than film.
Well, and it was really nice because for $4,000 you could rent a Red 1 package for 2 weeks and film on it. And that was like half or a third the price of what you would spend on any other setup, and then the amount,
absolutely,
you got 4K out of it, you got raw footage out of it. Those are all great things, but then people like me, for example, never really thought about what am I going to do in post. And at the time when that was a popular move to make, you had to have like a Red Rocket card in order to process your footage. You had, I actually worked off of proxies and had to have someone else take care of my coloring. So it's, I don't know.
Right, and so it's just
not
now,
as cool
though,
as it was before.
A lot of prosumer level, what have you, is coming down to this level where they have 4K. I mean, not 6K, not 8K. It's nothing crazy, but like 4K is very commonplace. We have DSLRs with 4K footage coming out of them. How crazy is that?
DSLRs, mirrorless,
mirrorless, I guess. Yeah, sure, mirrorless. Because Canon won't do it, and Nikon seems to be falling off the wagon. But we've got these tiny handheld cameras that are doing 4K at this point. So the claim to fame of Red just doesn't seem to be there now that like everyone else is reaching 4K. We still don't have TVs that are 4K. Like 4K as a broadcast format isn't there yet either. So 4K is only really for post. We have consumer tech at 4K. We have prosumer tech at 4K. We've got handy, like, I call them handy cams, whatever you want to call them, small prosumer camcorders are at 4K. So now, like Red, what do you have to brag about besides the fact that you shoot RAW, which they are probably the only ones who do 4K and RAW besides a Blackmagic, which a lot of people have different.
And the RAW workflow for Red is much better. Working with Red code is so much nicer than freaking DNG files.
There's a whole industry behind it, and Blackmagic's built around like an open source. I don't even think it's an ideology, just for price. They're built around open source.
Well, and that's the thing. So Red had like the technological lead when they first entered the market, but then they've done stuff like the Mysteria sensor. They've said, okay, we're gonna give you this new thing, and then it doesn't come forever. Or the promise of 4K for 4K, that never really materialized. We never got the $4,000 4K camera that Red had always talked about. And over time, they've sort of allowed their market share to erode because they're not the innovator anymore. Now they're just another camera in the lineup. Before, they were the major innovator. They had all the cool stuff. They were getting all the cool tech out before anybody else. They were offering it in a sub $20,000 price range because the bodies for the original Red 1 were what, like $10,000, $9,000, and then you could kit them out and hit maybe 18,000 to 20,000 depending on what accessories and monitors and so on. And now you have Arri's dropping cameras down into the $30,000 range for those sorts of purchases. I mean, how do you justify going with Red versus Sony or any of these other ones? And then even on their lower price models, you have stuff like the FS5 that it's in such a good price bracket that it's missing some of the stuff, but dang, is it cheap? I will definitely buy something that's good enough if I don't really need crazy frame rates or what have you.
And in terms of that post production, if you don't need RAW, this may be a crazy
RAW's
thought
a pain
process.
in the butt, man.
Well, this may be a crazy thought, but as much as I'm really interested in these Sony's FS7, FS5 cameras, I haven't seen something really narrative shot on them yet. And that was always like a complaint. People are like, Panasonic looks a little video-y. And I don't argue with them. You have to work a little bit to get it away from looking kind of sharp and kind of video-y. Because even when, I don't know if it's Philip Bloom or who, somebody did a short on the GH4 before it went to market. And even then, that short kind of felt like, I don't know, made for TV kind of a thing. It didn't feel very cinematic. And it was more than just the lighting and the lens choices and everything else. It was something about the data and the sensor. And so Red has always had a pretty good filmic look. The way that it handles the grain and the highlights and everything else is really good too. I'm not convinced that the Sony cameras are quite hitting that point. I don't think they look as video-y maybe as, I hate using that word, but as video-y as like the Panasonic GH4 does out of the box. Though things like Vlog and stuff like that can definitely help.
Well, and you're going to get much better 4K imaging out of the FS5 and FS7 than you do out of the GH4. I mean,
sure, yeah, because you got the higher bit rates and everything else. But if you want kind of something that comes out of the camera already looking pretty filmic, and you don't need RAW because you aren't going to do a whole lot in post. It's like renting a C500 or something like that. You can get that 4K if you want it, or a C300 if you don't need the 4K.
Well, doesn't the Mark II of the 300 have internal 4K recording?
I think it. Yeah, I think it has internal 4K recording, but I keep forgetting because all these marks have like really changed what each of the cameras do, and it's all over the place. But
I'm right. Like I used to have an encyclopedic knowledge, be able to rattle off parts and label numbers of everything. But now you have the 7 series mirrorless cameras from Sony. You have the 7 series video cameras from Sony. You have the 100 series, the 300 series. You have the 5D Mark III. So many numbers are close enough to the same now that I actually do have to pay attention to the show notes in order to know what the heck I'm supposed to say. I don't know. Basically, guys, we're not bagging on Red too much, but I know a ton of people that were in the Red camp pretty solid who have moved away from it simply because they've been promised new stuff coming down the pike and haven't gotten it yet. And so many other camera companies are offering up very attractive pricing as well as feature sets that it makes it hard to justify going over to the Red camp.
And of the Red camp, there's one more point I want to make. I don't know if this is still true, but on a few behind-the-scenes videos recently of some people who are shooting projects, they're talking about using the Canon C300 to shoot something, and they've talked about how it's the mirror, the screen automatically flips and rotates depending on how you position it on the front of your camera, saying that the Red monitor never had like a flip and a flop. I think it only had like one type of flip. So like it made it so you could only mount the monitor in like 2 ways, otherwise it wouldn't look right side up in your viewfinder. And I think that that's been a request for Red to fix in their firmware for a long time, and they've never touched it. So it could be little things like that people have been demanding from Red, and Red's been kind of lacking on, is why maybe they move over to other equipment.
Now, if you do want a discount on a Red Scarlet X, you can find these guys down as low as $4,000 on eBay. A lot of people are selling off their kit left and right. So if you
there's probably a few people who even like buy it for a project and then sell it.
Yeah, that used to happen. That used to happen a lot more than it does now, simply because the price is dropping so dramatically. In the older days, and I say the older days, like 4 years ago, you could go buy a brand new camera, shoot an entire project, and you could resell it within like 6 months or a year at roughly the same price. You'd lose maybe a couple $100. Now it's like I'm seeing camera prices drop in half over the course of a year. And that's such a big drop, even in the higher end cameras, because there's so many new devices coming out.
That's like the cell phone market, man.
It's cannibalizing itself. So you can't really plan on resale as part of your budget, because before you could be like, okay, well, I'm buying $10,000 worth of camera gear, but at the end of the shoot, I'm going to sell that off. I figure I'll lose like 20%. So here's my margins, no problem.
Right.
Now it's more like you have no idea. Like lenses are still pretty stable.
Well,
you can still get your money out of those, but bodies and accessories are.
Canon's upset at people from cannibalizing them in the gray market when they themselves like took their C300 Mark I and shattered the price, and like upset a lot of people, even people that I know that bought that camera 2 months before a giant price drop. That kind of feels like you're turning your back on your customer base when you do that kind of stuff. So you're right. You have no idea what's going to happen with the value of this camera down the road. I remember things like the AF100, which no one even thought was that great of a camera, but everyone on the message boards said it would be the next coming. I think that camera stayed at $3,000 for something like 4 or 5 years. But now, like everything coming out right now, it's just shattering and dropping in price so readily.
Man, I'm looking at these red prices, and it's just unbelievable how cheap it's gotten. That's crazy. All right. On that note, Devin, do you have anything else you want to cover before we get out of here?
No, I think I've ranted for far too long.
Man, I see that glass of wine next to you is completely empty too. Good job, buddy. All right, on that note, thanks for listening to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. Devin, as always, has been a great co-host of the show, so thanks, man, for sticking with it for so long. You can find the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, anywhere else the podcasts are distributed. Devin, where can people find you?
You can find me at Twitter at DevoCut, where I'll argue more about Reds and Panasonic and cameras and crappy Chinese batteries that keep turning off on me.
Hey, one last thing I wanted to note before we get out of here, actually, is that the last episode I mentioned the Leica cameras, and a number of you corrected me, and I want to point this out.
They did.
They did.
They got angry, too.
I don't pay enough attention to Leica, so obviously I don't know what's going on here.
Obviously.
Apparently, Leica has been rebranding Panasonic cameras for the last 5 or 6 years.
How could you not know, DJ? They've been rebranding for years.
I didn't know that they had a FZ1000 clone that was Leica branded. I did not know that several of the other flavors of Panasonic's cameras were rebranded and marked up like 5,000 and turned gray.
To be honest, that's probably why you don't know, is because Leica hasn't come out with a camera that has any outstanding features. Because of that, no one talks about it because they go, well, it's the same thing really as this camera. They're comparable, so what's the point? And if that camera came out first, that's the one that gets the press. So since Leica isn't coming to market with anything fresh and new, you haven't heard the brand or paid attention to any of the cameras because it's not worth paying attention to.
The other correction I'm going to throw in there is that I mentioned the LX100 doesn't have image stabilization. I've actually just never read through the menus. It does, in fact, have image stabilization. I just never actually ran into it. So those two cameras, the LX100 and the Lux D109, are exactly identical, not just kind of identical. So there you go, guys. And you can also buy the Panasonic in a gray form factor with a classy brownish motif, so you can still get that Leica look. On that note, I'm going to close out this show. Thanks again for watching, listening, and make sure you like, subscribe, and do all that stuff that is great for our iTunes ratings. We'll see you next time on another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. And that is the end for the audio listeners.
Damn.
And we went full length. Devin, good job, man.
Yeah, we did. We made it work.
All right.
And you're like, screw Varavon. I hate Varavon.
No, Varavon's great, but that particular flavor of their 3-axis gimbal has been announced for 2 years, or a year and a half. No, 2 years. And
they haven't really updated much.
And they didn't get it out for a year and some change after it was announced, and then even then they haven't really done much with it. They've kind of let it linger on the vine. So, that's just
I know.
Goes.
It's been slow.
And December, guys who are still watching, is a pretty slow month for camera releases and news in the camera department. Devin and I scraped the barrel, and I'll actually throw a shout-out to Devin here. He filled up most of the show notes today because I was dealing with some new house issues. My wife wants all the wires gone from my entertainment center. So I've been running wires through walls and conduit and so on in order to accommodate her request, and now our TV is a monolithic 60-inch floating on a wall above the fireplace with no cords or what have you, so that's kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah, it's a nice aesthetic when you can afford it.
Yeah, well, I kind of, now that I've done all this, I'm like, man, it'd be really nice if I had one of those wall mounts, but my 60 inches of plasma, and that's got to
Ooh.
weigh like 100 and some
Yeah.
pounds. So until I upgrade, and actually,
Until you upgrade to OLED.
well, yeah, and I don't know, this is not a TV podcast, but
No, it's not.
have you seen the new 4K OLED screens? They're in the like $1.50 change
Yeah.
for a
No, they're way down in
55 inch.
price.
It's
Yep,
pretty sexy.
if I actually made money at my job, I'd be all over one of those. I watch enough movies and enough content. It's worth the money to me to get a decent TV.
Now, the only thing is, the OLED is super bright.
Yeah, dude, contrast ratios. It's like plasma. But black is like true black. Like you can't get any blacker than black.
Yeah.
Just like plasma. So
Well, and the new ones
yeah,
have local
it's-
dimming too, so it's like they can
Yeah.
actually just turn 1 pixel black if they want to.
Right, and so it's just it gets this amazing contrast ratio, and as much as everyone's all about 4K, contrast is so much more important in a TV than its details. So
Yeah, that's why I've held on to I have the last high end Sony plasma, or no, Panasonic plasma television they released. I don't remember what the model is, but the image quality is so good that
Yeah.
I've just been holding on to it. It's a monster trucker. It's heavy as all get out, but up until recently, it's looked better than even some of the higher end OLED camera or screens on the market for its price range. So I don't know. And now, like, I just got rid of one of my 42-inch TVs. It sold for like $100. 42-inch television for $100.
Yep.
You want to talk about
dude, the
price
market's-
drop?
Yeah. Did I tell you I got a 50-inch for 180? I think it's only like a year and a half old.
What?
I don't even care. Yeah, I got it on Craigslist. What's it over there? You can kind of see a 50-inch, and it's Vizio, so it's like another no-name brand. But
Vizio's got some good stuff these days.
well, they've
really
got good
come
stuff,
around.
but they don't make their own panels. But yeah, so I got one of those for like 180, and I think it's even got like passive 3D, where I can like put on like the passive 3D glasses, not the active ones, and do 3D. I don't care about much for 3D, you know that. But yeah, I got one of those off Craigslist for 180, which was a nice upgrade from my old Sony Bravia LCD. So, but yeah, just for now, because I'll eventually get a decent TV. But
Yeah, I'm gonna probably. Well, I don't know. We'll see how gaming in the living room goes.
you got a Steam Link?
Well, no. I have an actual full-fledged gaming computer hanging out on my TV, but I rarely use it. But every time I build a little entertainment center for myself somewhere else in the house so that my wife can continue to watch what she wants to watch
Sure.
while I game, which I haven't actually sat down and played anything in about 2 months, 3 months. So
Neither have I.
it's great that I have several grand invested in a gaming machine that just sits and plays Netflix. So good job,
Right.
DJ, on that one. All right, that was your extra content, guys. Devin and I's TV talk. If you have any picks or recommendations for TVs, let us know, because I might be in the market for one of these 4K big panels down the road. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. New house, so. All right, that's it. We're going to close this out.